What's going on, y'all? This particular video, similar to another video I did in the past about millennials, but this time I want to explain why the way we are, and instead of millennials, the word that they like to use, this is mainly for people within hip hop. Millennials is all spread across all races and countries and different things, but I'm talking specifically hip hop, what I call the keep it real and get money generation. The reason I call it that is because keep it real and get money are the two different mantras that we grew up in. Hip hop always seems to have a certain mantra most artists are pretty much spewing to the public. In the 90s generation, in the 90s era, it was all about keeping it real. If you are familiar with 90s rap, that's all them niggas used to talk about. Keep it real. You gotta keep it real. All that matters is keeping it real. I always keep it real. You ain't never keeping it real. I'm saying, what would happen if the world was a real place? That's all them dudes used to ever talk about. And me being young and impressionable at the time and idolizing these dudes, along with a lot of people around my age, born in 80s, raised in the 90s, that was our shit. Like we was taught from a very young age that keeping it real was the most important thing in life. It pretty much was, a lot of us didn't grow up with fathers, so it pretty much is the same thing as your father sitting you down and say, hey son, I want to talk to you about life. One of the most important things that you could ever do in life is keep it real. That's gonna stick with you. And since we didn't have fathers, a lot of us didn't had no big brothers or nothing like that, uncles around, we was pretty much surrounded by women. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. But we listen to these guys. We listen to these artists in hip hop. And what they would constantly tell us is keep it real. Always keep it real. That's the most important thing in life, is keeping it real. Nothing else matters if you ain't keeping it real. It stuck with a lot of us. You get older, by the time the 2000s hit, I'm in like middle school. All throughout the 2000s, that's like middle school, high school, college. And all throughout the 2000s, the mantra changed from keeping it real being the most important thing. Now getting money is the most important thing. Get money at all costs. Get the money. Get to the money. Get the moolah, the dollars, the cash, the ducats. Getting paid. Give me that bread. That's all that mattered in the 2000s. Hip hop, all the groundwork that the legends did in the 90s, probably one of hip hop's most coveted generations. Them in the 80s and the 90s, they right there. 80s is the pioneers. The 90s, they took it to a whole nother level. And they set the foundation for the 2000s. They took hip hop to a certain level. They took it to new heights that where the dudes in the 2000s could actually make a lot of money, whether they was actually talented or not. They kicked a lot of doors open for a lot of people to make their money, and that's all the 2000s was about: getting money and living that lifestyle. That ghetto fabulous lifestyle, buying all the throwback jerseys, driving the nice cars, living in these mansions. This when things like MTV Cribs and things was real popular, because that's what they were selling to us, this lifestyle. Even though we found out all these years later, most of these dudes wasn't living that lifestyle. A lot of these houses was rented, cars was leased, and it was all a facade. That was instilled in us in that next part of our lives when we were still young and impressionable. By the time the 2010 generation rolled around, most of us was old enough to where we knew who we was, at least to a certain extent, and we wasn't rocking with none of that new shit. Once all the skinny jeans and stuff started coming in, and seemed like the 2010s was all about savagery, being a savage, being the most horrible, despicable human being you could possibly be. So I was subscribing to that. I was part of the keep it real, get money generation. When you put all that together, you got a kid, or you have a human being who they all about getting money, but not at the expense of keeping it real. Keeping it real still, that's the number one thing, because that's what you was told when you was a very young and impressionable, younger than you were when you was a teenager. As a teenager, you understood the world a little bit. You felt like you knew everything. You didn't just accept everything that people told you. You started to question things. But when you're young and impressionable, that's when it is. So our generation, getting money isn't more important than keeping it real. Keep it real is always the most important thing. Be who you are. Be authentic. Being a real nigga. The generation after us, who was very young before their teens, listening to the whole get money generation, I feel like that's why they're so fucked up now, because all they grew up hearing was get money, get money, get money at all costs. They didn't hear the whole keep it real thing. At least it wasn't as important to hip hop as it was in the 90s. So because of that, a lot of these kids, getting money is the most important thing in the world. Being who you are, being authentic, it doesn't matter as much as keeping it real. It's a lot farther down on the list. So because of that, people compromise themselves for money and fame and do anything. And that's what we're seeing in the industry right now. We got people dressing up like women, all type of weird, funny style shit. That me being in the keep it real generation, we ain't rocking with that shit. All this skinny jeans, holes in the jeans. I ain't rocking with none of that type shit, bro. That ain't my style right there. I ain't knocking anyone who does it, but that ain't me right there. I still aspire to be like the guys I grew up watching. I take the good and the bad. I accept the bad, and I take the good and I try to emulate that. The bad, I accept them for who they are, and I cast it to the side. I don't try to emulate the bad. Even though a lot of the dudes who claim that they was keeping it real, they wasn't keeping it as real as they was in the music. You know, we didn't know that. You know, you don't know that until you get older. You know, and I forgive them too, because even though they wasn't living the lifestyle, it's almost like your parents tell you, do as I say, not as I do. So that's kind of how I looked at it. What they were telling us was right. You know, be authentic, be who you are at all time, even though they may not have been living up to that at the time. You know, because 90s was all about being real and gangster. You know, real meant gangster back then. You know, but to us, real just means being who you are. But you know, the 90s was all about gangster rap. So a lot of the guys who claimed they was keeping it real was just being fake gangsters. It was what it was. I feel like that the whole keep it real, get money generation, especially on the East Coast, we kind of got skipped over in hip hop. You don't see too many East Coast guys in their mid 20s, mid to late 20s, early 30s that's prominent in the game. Like the only one is like Troy Ave, and that I ain't got nothing to say bad about Troy Ave, but he's not necessarily what I would call keeping it real. He's all about crack and all this type of stuff, but it's all good. We see the whole situation that played out, Irving Plaza and all that. I ain't judging them. It is what it is. But growing up in the hood, seeing what all the crack epidemic has done to the neighborhood, seeing crackheads on the corner, I can't support anybody that still talks like that in this day and age, especially when you rapping now, making all this money supposedly. It is what it is. You know, everybody don't move the same way. Everybody wasn't raised with principles and morals and all those other things. You know, those things are pushed to the back in favor of getting money, and you know that's not how I was raised. You know, and when I say that our generation was skipped over, there's guys that's our age that's doing their thing, like the Kendricks, the Big Sean, Wale, Drake, J. Cole, but none of them guys is from the East Coast. I want to see the East Coast resurgence, and people like Joey Badass. You know, he's a lot younger than we were. I think he was born like 95. You know, you don't have your first memories until like 4 or 5 years old, so he didn't really experience the 90s. He kind of just looked back on it and is reminiscent. Well, not reminiscent, but I guess nostalgic, I guess you could call it. Nostalgic of a different time period. I actually lived through the 90s, you know what I'm saying? So it's different for me. It ain't I don't have to go back and look. I remember. I feel like we've been skipped over. Like you haven't heard much from somebody like my age as a rapper on the East Coast on a mainstream level. The South pretty much took over once the 2000s came around, and they ain't never let go since then. I definitely want to see an East Coast emergence. Because our generation, the keep it real, get money generation, we definitely got something to say. We definitely got, you know, we definitely got something to teach these younger guys who grew up in that whole different era. They didn't get the whole keep it real part of it. They just got the get money part. Now they get the whole savage part. Everyone wants to be a damn savage. I mean, that's not, growing up, matter of fact, I got a package on the way. Our generation is coming. We on the come up. Holla at your boy. Just my thoughts, ladies and gentlemen.